Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome once again to Finding Me on the ITV networks. Today with a very special and dear person to my heart, and that is Professor Miti. Professor Kataboro Miti is the Professor Emeritus at the Department of Political Sciences at the University of Pretoria. And he has been involved in a whole range of issues and studies, brings forth together, I think, for all of us who have sat in his company, who have listened to his lectures, who have participated with him in seminars, a world of wisdom and deep insights. And so with that, I'd like to say thank you very much, Professor, for being here. And finally, for me, making the time to actually grab this moment and get you on camera.
Well, you are welcome. And good afternoon to your listeners, or good evening. I don't know which is the right.
The viewers, yes. It will be evening and afternoon. Professor, let's start with your long journey. I mean, it's been a very, very long journey and a very interesting journey. You started off in the Vatican in Rome. And after that, you've significantly progressed, or I don't know if you can call it progress, it depends on how you define these terms, but shifted your perspectives into various fields and moved along the continent of Africa. So you've experienced different countries in Africa, different perspectives, and that will perhaps what contributes so much to your insights. What took you firstly to Rome and to the Vatican?
Well, to Rome in the Vatican, that was 1972. I was starting to become a priest. But unfortunately, I never made it. So I came back to Tanzania in 1970, end of 73, after my Bachelor of Philosophy. And with that background, I joined the University of Dar es Salaam in 1974 for a Master's in Political Science, which I completed in 75, capped by President Nyerere at that time. And then I proceeded to Canada in 1976. And completed my PhD in 1980, so it has been a long time.
Okay, so that moment when you were kept by Nyerere and you were living in that political context, I mean, amongst one of perhaps Africa's greatest minds, what was it like, and what did that influence contribute to your understanding of development and of Africa and to an understanding of freedom and liberation?
Well, I think at that time in Tanzania, especially from 67 onwards, and the University of Dar es Salaam in particular was a kind of university which brought in all different kinds of people who were interested in development, and in particular socialist development. It looked like a big challenge, all right, especially for most of the scholars. Most of those people you hear around the world who have written about development, either from Latin America or from Africa or from Europe, a good number of them were at the University of Dar es Salaam.
Wow.
Okay, and that's why I think in the 70s, it was one of the best universities to be. There was constant debates from Samir Amin, from the economists and so on. So it was something which was a very lively place to be.
And it produced, I suppose, very many different theories, different understandings of development, but perhaps also produced different worldviews.
Well, it did. Basically, there were those who were on the left of the socialism, or were socialists. There were those like me. I normally call myself a nationalist, okay, not a socialist. There is a difference between the two, and my PhD was on whether Tanzanian socialism was actually socialism or nationalism.
And what was your conclusion?
My conclusion was that it was much more of a nationalism. Nationalist development, nationalist ideas, trying to find a way, okay, which is different from the others to be able to develop. Whether we call it socialist or not, that might be a different thing to say. But I think it was focused, okay, on trying to find rapid development for the poor people at the beginning. And one should understand that when Tanzania became independent, there were less than 30 degree people, owners, okay, and Nyerere being one of them. So it was a very small...
privileged community, I would say.
No, but the thing is, that's why the focus was on education. There was a lot of focus on education, which I think Tanzania has succeeded, okay. It has been able to produce a lot of people, a lot of PhDs across the globe. You are likely to find them almost anywhere in the world, teaching or doing research and so on. But the other thing was focus on poverty. Okay, how do you fight poverty? And Nyerere was saying, we must run while others walk, because the distance between us and the actual needs of development was so big that you could not just say this is normal development. And I don't think whether Africa needs the normal development, you know, the stages of growth and so on. It needs a kind of rapid development, a leap of faith, saying things can be done. And definitely those who have tried have succeeded.
And so do you think Nyerere's vision was correct and that he was a strong and a good leader? Yes,
definitely Nyerere is still one of the best leaders, okay, that the continent produced. It might have differed, for example, on how to bring about African Union. Okay, he's the one who brought in regionalism, where Nkrumah was talking of African unity from the start. And was saying, no, it cannot be. He's one of those leaders who was focused on poverty. How do you deal with a person, okay, who has nothing? And literally, we might say that Africa has not developed. Africa has actually developed. The pace has been fast, but not fast enough. Because if you walk around the continent, and I'm glad that I've been able to visit almost more than 40 countries on the continent, you find a deep change, okay, from people who are going half naked, okay, and now we are on TV, you know, and talking about development. There has been a very big leap of faith. Now, development is slow, okay, we want it rapid, but one must choose what do you focus on first. And I think that has been where the difference has been.
Okay, so if you consider the more than 40 states that you've been to in Africa, what did Tanzania focus on in terms of development and to try and uplift the poorest of the poor in its state as compared to what you see other African states are doing? And perhaps maybe by them doing that, it's either a success story or a failure story.
You see, there were two things which Africa has been advised by the World Bank and the Western world. The initial focus was, say, you need to do industrialization and rapid industrialization. But I don't think whether we had the base to be able to do rapid industrialization. And so we focused on import substitution, export rate growth, and so on, but didn't bring about the dividends required because we didn't even have a market to be able to take those things in. And what Nyerere did, and maybe that's one of the major achievements of Tanzania, was focusing on rural development. He has been accused of bringing ujamaa, okay, or village socialism. But I think the main issue was not village socialism as such. When you have people scattered, your neighbor is 10 kilometers, 5 kilometers away, how do you bring about rural development without bringing these people closer?
Together, yeah.
Where you can be able to offer schools, you can be able to offer health services and so on. And I think that has been Nyerere's major achievement, the villagization of the country. And basically, wherever you go, you find people settled, and you find there is a school, there is health services, and so on. All right? Now, the problem has come that when the economy was still booming, yes, the schools had teachers, they had books, the health centers were being serviced. But then we changed the policy to privatization in 1985 onwards. And basically Nyerere stepped aside, saying, literally, I might not be able to have that leap of faith to be able towards, to move towards privatization. And that was one of the reasons why he resigned from leadership. Because,
so he didn't want to do that?
Yeah, he would not honestly, be able to tell a person that I've taken you to school, but I cannot provide you with the actual education because you are now supposed to pay, whether you have the money or you don't. I've provided you with the health center, but now you're supposed to pay for the health center.
By your medicines,
and so on. I have created industries, which now are very good industries, but we want to sell them on peanuts. And what basically a lot of people did was to buy those industries and kill them.
Wow.
And that has been maybe not only in Tanzania, but that's what privatization has done to the African continent. They think it's cheaper to import the goods from outside than to produce them internally. So most of the privatized industries, if one has to look at them, a lot of them are closed.
So how are we going to reverse that cycle?
Well, it's how one has to understand, maybe that's one might come to South Africa, how South Africa stopped the privatization drive at a certain point, because you cannot control a privatized industry. You can't control it, You cannot determine what is important for them to produce, which are the most important markets to deal with, and so on, And especially when you have sold these industries to international companies, not to locals, no. So we were in a situation that there were no locals who could buy, So you end up selling everything to the very people outside. And then you expect them to give you a good market and a good supply. So they already have industries somewhere else. So most of the industries of what has experienced in Tanzania and mostly in Africa has been the deindustrialization of Africa from 85 to the 90s.
Okay, so if we're moving from deindustrialization, what is the vision then in terms of African leadership? Do you think African leadership is kind of stuck in a vacuum and they don't know which way to go, being drawn to neoliberal economic policies, and then the argument on the other side move towards a developmental state? And of course, the new catchword is social democracy and social democratic economic principles, etc. But it seems on the whole that Africa is struggling in terms of its leadership.
Well, it might not only be just leadership. One has to look at development and look how the West has developed. It wasn't a leap of faith, just something simple. A lot of people suffered in the process. The process of industrialization had child labor, it had women labor, it had all these things. It had even piracy. We are talking of piracy in Somalia. Maybe that's what's keeping the Somalis surviving, because they have learned from the British how to become good pirates.
Yes.
So there was development is not something that comes cheap. And of course, we have now to jump, a kind of a jump which becomes very difficult. Even if you go to the Latin American countries, you go to Asian countries, apparently those that developed were not under democracy. No. They were actually under dictatorships of some sort. I'm not saying democracy is not good, but how do you incorporate democracy and ensure, that the people work hard, and they jump from being expectant of the government, the culture that the government is going to do everything for them, give them free education, like we are saying now in South Africa that no, everybody must have a free education, as if there was anywhere in the world a free education. I don't know any country that had a free education. There are means of subsidizing and so on, but there were also catches. We don't give you free education and then you don't pass and expect that you are going to remain at the university.
It's conditional.
It should be conditional.
Yes.
All right? and should also be conditional on you are being tied to certain jobs. Okay? For the government direct, these people have paid for, have to go and work in X, Y, Z.
So those opportunities and those positions must be available for them once they come out of the university?
Yes,
right.
Because it's tied to what type of development plan do you have, okay? And for the poorer countries, of course, Africa is, we tend to take it as one major continent.
Monolithic continent.
But I think we have those countries which have oil and the natural resources and so on, which are doing quite well because of the export rate growth. We have those countries which basically have nothing to move on, which are still struggling and are still even basing their budgets on aid from outside and so on, to be able to alleviate a little bit of the poverty that we are facing. But then, how do you go about, for each of those countries, you must find on how do you go about planning for development for that particular country.
Okay, so we have to go to a break. When we come back, we're going to try and answer that question. We'll see you after the break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to the second segment of Finding Me, today in the ITV networks with Professor Miti. And before we went on to the break, Professor was speaking about the different challenges that different African countries face, and of course the idea of how to find a good development plan for each state which has different kind of, which has a different context, different situations and different challenges. And so, Professor, having considered all of these questions and all of these different criteria, do you believe that there is a kind of template or a starting point that one can apply, or even common sense and logic, in order to get to a good development plan for a state?
I don't think whether there is a template. And maybe the biggest problem has been to provide us with templates. The structure adjustment programs, saying this is the template, this is how you can develop. And when they didn't work, then they come with something else. That, oh, no, it didn't work because it did not have the multipartyism, it did not have the democracy necessary, and so on. There is no template for in which a country can say, I am copying, this is the template. You start with the resources that you have, okay, the capabilities that you have. And for example, in Tanzania, okay, we said our major resources were people, okay, and hence the focus on developing the people. And since most of the population was staying in the rural areas, they focus on rural development. The unfortunate thing is we did not tie the rural development, okay, with the industrialization that was taking place, which was import substitution for the imports that we are doing, instead of focusing on the products that were being produced from the agriculture, transforming them into industrial goods and trying to sell them in that form. South Africa is different, okay? It starts with a very nice industrial base. And I think that's the main difference. It has a nice industrial base from which to start. And the question becomes, how do you make this industrial base functional and at the same time be able to take in the growth in labor, which has been growing at a very fast rate, than the market can accommodate. And maybe the question has been, was the neoliberal approach the best way? Okay, open the market for everybody to come in. Right now we are getting chickens from as far as South Africa, US, and killing our own
industries, yes.
industry. We have killed our clothing industry by lifting all the import duties on clothing and whatnot. Okay, and then we get flooded from China and so on. So one has to say, okay, this is the opportunities which I have, okay? And the tendency has been that we are in a global market, and therefore we should act as global actors for the global trends and so on. I think there is something which might have to learn from China and Russia. China closed itself off, okay? It's now coming out, okay, as the manufacturing part of the world, but it closed its borders to imports and so on. But then we say, okay, you can't do it in the global world, yet they do it themselves, okay? When we are talking of chicken, we are talking of exporting clothes to the US, they were talking of chicken, okay? Basically limiting you where you can go, saying if you don't give us the chicken space, okay, we are not going to give you the market for this and this, right? But I think Africa can be able to, we can focus differently.
Do you think what we need is a paradigm change and a mind shift change, and not simply just, slight adjustments or interventions? Or do you think that African leaders are somehow afraid to make that change? Because I listen to you, I listen to many other academics. It's obvious you've looked at the histories of the past, you've looked at the development of other states, you know what has worked, what hasn't worked. So the big question is, how come those that lead us and make the policies just don't seem to get it?
Well, at times they get it, but they don't follow through their policies. I'll give you a very simple example, because my wife was doing her PhD on black economic empowerment in the mining sector. Now, we say you sell so much to the black people, but we don't provide the resources where they are going to come from. So we are telling the same companies, okay, to create opportunities for black people. Definitely those companies have their own interests, okay? So they deal with those opportunities in as much as they can get those interests, okay? There is no funding available from the state, okay? But you wake up in the morning, you say, okay, we want black industrialists, for example, all right? So, the way we make our plans, we don't follow them through. I think that has been one of the major issues. We have a national development plan, which everybody says has accepted, okay, but we have randomly chosen specific elements to deal with, to implement, and then forgotten that the plan was a concrete plan. And you cannot just do one bit here, one bit there, and expect that the plan will work.
Right.
And I think we tend to underplay the pressures, okay, under which our leaders work, okay, that there are so many pressures and different pressures. There are pressures from the industries like in South Africa, okay, they have their lobbies and so on. We have labor, which has its own lobbying and so on, okay. Then we have, including academics, who are mostly advisors to the government, playing a different tune at times, okay? And it depends, you need a caliber of a leader who can be able to understand the terrain, okay, and understand the interests of the various groups. When I say that you need a caliber of a leader, okay, I'll give one simple example, which I got in Tanzania. Okay, Nyerere appointed somebody to become chairman of what you have as ESCOM here. Okay, and this guy did not have any basic knowledge of that industry. Okay, but he had leadership skills. So when he arrived there, he called those who were doing things. He said, okay, now tell me what you do. If you can convince me, okay, then I can be able to convince where the resources are coming from, okay, to support you. All right? So It does not mean that you should have your PhD.
Or experts in that particular
okay.
field, yes.
No, you know, leadership involves finding means, okay, to understand what the others are doing and why, okay, and being able to help them to do what they are doing better. Okay, that is what I would define leadership. And you know, Africa has had different leaders, those who went to school, those who did not go to school, and so on. But it's not only those who went to school who do better, some of them do worse.
Yes, that's true.
Okay, so it's not a school education that provides leadership.
Okay, so we're at the end of this one, but we're coming back for a second interview. Just to conclude, what is a favorite memory or a favorite comment that you remember about Nyerere or any African leader that you'd like to leave us with?
Well, I think the only thing I would say about Nyerere is what I said at the beginning. We must run while others walk. And since this is the Rio Olympics, okay, you have to learn how to learn. And we have not learned how to learn.
Okay, and that's a very powerful metaphor to end on. But we're coming back. We'll see you in the next interview. Fi amanillah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.